Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 848, the Belgian Grand Prix review. I'd like to do the Belgian national anthem for you, but I cannot. And I apologize up front. Yes, this is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know what this is. It's a race weekend, and you know how we do them.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
Yeah, it's exactly what we do on a race weekend. But before doing that, I have to actually go get a professional race car driver, and you know what that means.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, you're here, like magic.
Like a little wave of the wand.
Little wave of the wand, you're here.
Here I am.
It's amazing.
I forgot my cape, but I did.
Yeah. You should have like the whole, well, I don't know. Should you have the Union Jack flag as a massive 30-foot long cape, or should you have the English
I've
flag?
contemplated it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Would you go with the English flag or the whole just Union Jack?
I'll go Union Jack.
Yeah, why not? That's a cool flag.
I love Scotland. I love Wales. You know,
Yeah,
they may
sure
have
you
something
do.
against me, but that's okay. Probably rightfully so.
You may still owe them money.
Some of the women back. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, all good.
Yeah. Paul,
The problem is, sometimes, I go out and do it in a bit hard, on St. George's Day, but no one really gets it anyway, and they just think I'm doing a very bad Def Leppard impersonation. So, give it up on that.
Right. Well, Paul, I've got woes of my own over here. My chair broke, and so, like me, I found a really cheap chair on the line, and it is like the noisiest chair ever made.
Oof.
It's like constant squeaking, and it's terrible. So I apologize to listeners up front. So that means I can barely move in this chair without making a noise. I'm
Wonders
surprised.
of plastics.
Yeah, and I'm surprised it's not just squeaking when I breathe. It's that sensitive, that bad. So apologies up front. Oh, I'm telling you, the things I go through.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
But at least
for you.
at least I didn't get let go by Alpine. So
Yeah.
dodged a bullet there.
There's a few of those.
Close. Yeah.
Yikes.
That was,
Were they able to make enough cakes to say thanks for your service? I'll whip that up in a minute,
Now, Milton, make sure everybody gets a piece. But I was told, and not Mars there, but I was told I get a piece of cake. Okay, but I'm going to burn this
Everyone's
place
running
down.
away from the headquarters in France with their red staplers for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy weekend at the Belgian Grand Prix. But, Paul, some people lovingly refer to this circuit as the mighty Spa-Francorchamps. And I would argue it's one of the best racetracks in the world, and leave it to my Belgian colleagues for designing such an epic racetrack. Well, the weekend certainly was hobbled by a lot of rain, right? They moved it ahead a month, said, hey, there's less rainfall in July. Cool. Gotcha. Yeah. So, look, that comports with Spa. It is the Ardennes Forest,
But it's own microclimate, so I heard.
It's its own microclimate. Yeah. And
they were selling
you know,
T-shirts in Spa, actually, saying.
They were microclimate.
Thank you for entering a microclimate.
Yeah.
Please act accordingly.
Yeah. Pick up your litter. It's a microclimate, for crying out loud. Did you know, Paul?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. It could be raining. Oh, zip it. Zip it. Oh my gosh. I think if you're newer to Formula One, you're just starting to hear that. And if you hear it, we've been saying this for like 10 years. People stop saying that on every single broadcast. So that's the inside joke if you hear us all laughing about it. So the longtime TPF listeners, they know the joke. Let's see. Yeah, anyway, hobbled by rain, that comports. But it also shortened the sprint race by 4 laps. They had a safety car formation laps. They had 4 of those formation laps and then a rolling start behind that. I think the challenge for me is that while I can appreciate the desire to host a sprint race, it's such an amazing track, and I do applaud that because it is a great track. It does present sort of a challenge due to the length of the track, and then also, the weather, and getting all three sessions, especially a points awarding sprint race can be tough. It's bad enough trying to get qualifying and the race in Spa in good weather, let alone a sprint race, two qualifyings and an actual race, right?
Right.
So
we should do them all the sprint races at Bahrain.
all of them at Bahrain. Yeah.
There you go. Problem
There
solved.
you go. Yeah, that would be a problem solved. I think it's also hard for some people, at least me. I'm speaking for me. I don't want to assume other people are as dull as I am. But I think it's also hard to get your head around the fact that, all right, race weekend, here we go. Friday morning, you're up. Boom, first practice session for an hour. You think, okay, whoa, okay. Then now we're qualifying for an event 2 days away? Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
By the time we get to the race, I even forgot what the hell happened in qualifying back on Friday, right?
Right.
Because I've seen a sprint race and another qualifying session, another, so it's kind of like, I kind of feel like if they want to do this, they've got to tweak maybe the format. For me, sprint quali could be on Friday.
Yeah.
And Saturday could be the sprint race and then maybe quali for the actual race.
Yeah.
Something.
Like normal people.
Yeah. So then I've got like a Friday practice session, a quali for sprint, then sprint the Saturday morning, and then Saturday afternoon, a quali for the race on Sunday, And there's, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm just trying to think of this in a linear fashion, but I don't know.
Yeah. Or not have two qualifying sessions.
Or not
have two practices on Friday and have a qualifying, and the starting position is the same for both races.
Same for both
and we
races.
can bring some kind of normality to it.
I know,
As you say, literally you got a 1 hour practice, and if it's cut back by rain or whatever, then you're just kind of throwing things in there. Maybe, I guess that's what some people like. It's not what I like.
It's not like.
I like the teams to have enough time to actually sort themselves out and figure it out, and some of the things that evolve from practice I think are interesting, right? Because we just get too diverted by instant gratification and rather than the slow build. But
I kind of like the slow burn of a Formula One weekend, watching the practice. And I was a fan of the hour and a half sessions. And I watched them all because there's so much you can tell out of those sessions. It's just
and as your anchor say, it's like it leads to other conversations where they're not having to literally commentate on the here and now. They can speculate and think about different avenues of what this, and even talk about outside the box of that actual event on Formula One. And I think it's we all know that Formula One is more depth than just qualify, race, go.
Right.
That's why it probably didn't catch on, and that the Drive Survive program kind of opened the window into the intricacies that ended educating people, and people ended up finding interesting. And then we're still trying to do this instant gratification stuff. But
the deeper dive you take into F1, the more hooked you become.
I think,
and
that's why it shouldn't be all on, well, that race was boring or that race was exciting, let's duplicate it. Because there's so much more going on than the actual race or the results sometimes. And that's why we read Autosport every morning, and why we try to find more information about how the cars are evolving and that kind of thing. I mean, it's just so deep in and you can it never ends, basically. If you want to keep diving, you dive and you keep diving. So
so that's true. It's a tough weekend. Must have been a very difficult weekend to determine the setup, and I'm curious if McLaren's setup was really hoping for rain. I assume they were, but also admitting that their straight line speed was never going to, I don't know. It's never going to complement their car's strength. So they went with a setup that they had that was best for them. If you're new to F1, one thing that might be fun is to go back and look at the different tracks and corners and how they behaved with the evolution of the technology in the cars in the past. And that's something that we saw this weekend that sort of revealed itself a little. And it used to be, as all too well. It used to be Eau Rouge, right? And so, and this is really meant for newer fans of Formula One. But if Eau Rouge was never a flat out full throttle corner,
Yeah,
for
right.
its inception, right? And then in the 90s, it was close and close. And you could look up Jacques Villeneuve and Ricardo
Yeah.
Zonta. They
Yeah.
both were 2 years on the trot.
They were yeah, they were ahead of the technology, let's put it that
They
way.
were slightly ahead of the technology and adhesion. They rode off both the cars, and serious accidents at the top of Eau Rouge at Radeon. And so anyway, it is interesting to watch those evolutions. So it was Eau Rouge. Then it kind of was Pouhon, right? Pouhon was the real challenge for those cars. But this weekend is kind of the no-name corner became a bit of a challenge for him.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
That's been a challenge for a lot of series that race there, actually. The
Is
track
it?
limits challenge, but yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
a corner. You're on the ragged edge, and it is important leading up to the double lefts. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a crucial
Yeah.
corner.
And if you go look at other tracks, it's the same rules apply. I mean, you look at the 130R at Suzuka, that was always, but now it's just flat out. It's today's Formula One cars sort of slightly recognize it as a corner, but then it kind of went to Spoon. That was a real crook, and now it's really Degner 1 and 2.
Right. Yeah.
At Suzuka that are critical, that they're on the limit. So anyway, for me, I nerd out on that stuff to go back and see older races and where they could, how the predominant corner has changed over the years as the cars have
Right.
changed. It's such a cool thing.
It was interesting that they said, that Verstappen was having a slight lift
At Eau
into a
Rouge.
Rouge because, basically you're like overdriving into it to do it flat. And maybe
Yeah.
it's easier to do it flat. You don't have to think about it. There's less nuance to it, but I can understand the attitude of the car and kind of stressing it less at that point and being able to actually get some more momentum coming up over radio. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and maybe that's. I guess am I reading between the line? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe it's a combination of things in Eau Rouge that a slight lift in Rouge goes a long ways to assisting tire management.
Yeah. I mean,
those
and
cases.
sometimes doing a corner flat isn't actually adding any speed to your car at the end because you're literally going into when the tire's starting to kind of bite in and slide maybe just a little bit, even though you're doing it flat. It's not actually beneficial for your actual mile per hour coming off the corner.
Yeah,
And definitely, if you do a little lift, it's gonna stress the tire a lot less and keep that tire under you for a lot longer.
a little
'Cause
longer.
that's like the biggest stress point in Formula One, I think, right there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then we remember when we used to do the track walks and whatever. We used to talk about the engine and who used to care? Was it Shell that sent them out or Renault? Talked about the engine right there at the top of Radeon.
Yeah, Renault, I
That was
think.
kind of like they ran out of all oil pressure and everything just for a split
Mhm.
second because of the rise. It Radeon, yet the car's glued down, so everything else is just being sloshed up into the air, and that at
Yeah.
any moment that engine's just about to explode, and then it comes back.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it's such a
it was cool.
cool impact on the car. Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about the race. We'll start at the sharp end of the grid. You got Red Bull, Max Verstappen taking the win in P1, Sergio Perez in P2. Perez had a good start, pulled a Schumacher chop across the front. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
He's angry.
yeah. He was an angry young man. He came across the front slot in behind Charles, and eventually passed Charles down the Kemmel Straight. And in the cool down room, it was kind of funny to listen to Charles and Sergio's conversation, where he's like, "Yeah, I mean, you're toast. You're and Sergio's just like, yeah, you were gonna be toast. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
Back off a little bit, get a run out of Radeon, and then just smoke him down Kimmel Straight. So Charles knew he was kind of a sitting duck there. But anyway, got around, took the lead. The team boxed him in a little bit. He wasn't as quick as Max on the mediums, which is really where the real disparity in his and Max's race happened. Max made quick work of him to take the lead. and Sergio wasn't putting in the times. Those mediums in Sergio's hands just didn't do as well as in Max's. But he did, but there again, I'm not picking on him at all. I mean, he did exactly what he needed to do, which is finish second and maximize the team points. So it was a good actual result, and possibly, a good psychological win for him to get back on the podium and not be, having to explain why he finished in sixth and that sort of thing. So that's probably a good thing. And I think at that point, once Max got around, it was all about managing tires and getting it to the end and getting the podium and maximize the team points.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the result wise, it was what the team wanted, but I don't think in the performance it is.
Correct.
I mean, he's 20 something seconds behind Max, and he was
20,
5
22.
seconds ahead of him at the start of the race, probably.
Yeah.
That's a massive deficit.
Huge deficit.
And the only reason he's second is because no one's building as good a car right now.
Right.
I mean, if Ferrari or McLaren or Mercedes were building a car that's just a tenth or two off of Red Bull, I still think Max would be winning. But I also think that Sergio would be shown a bit glaring that he's still lacking for pace. I don't think it was any better performance than he's been doing. It just the car is flattering him and giving him a result. And I think he's, as Helmut Marko backed up, he's given up his silly thinking that he's in the hunt for the world championship. I mean, I think he's resigning himself. And I think, the interviews, people, they're just kind of placating a little bit, making him feel good about himself. But in the end, when he gets back to his room on his own, I'm thinking he's still got a long ways to go before he shows speed that he actually has shown before against Max.
Yeah.
But it's just not there right now for whatever reason.
Yeah, for whatever reason. And it really isn't. No, I think you're spot on. I think it's absolutely the right result for Sergio, but I don't know that the performance was the right performance because he was 22 seconds adrift. And how much of that was at this point, lift and coast, managing tires and not pushing when, he possibly could. So I think that 22 seconds, even if you cut it in half down to 10 seconds, but it's still quite a delta considering that Max started down in 6 and Sergio started in P2.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, I think, everyone's like, oh, Max is driving the best car in the field. And he is.
He is.
But he's also at the top of his game and his team's at the top of his game with their car.
Yeah.
And that's what's winning all the races. Because if you look back to Sergio, you're not winning half the races already this year.
Right.
And, you compare to other dominant series at the time, like when Barrichello was number 2 to Schumacher, or when Rosberg was number 2 to Hamilton, even Bottas to some degree. They were a lot closer to their teammates consistently. And so I'm seeing this as a dip in Sergio's performance, and I think it makes him a little vulnerable to be replaced because at some point the other teams are going to make their cars more competitive, and that performance wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you say that. I went back this afternoon over lunch and I was looking at past races from 2020, 2019, and I just chose Lewis and Valtteri as an example. And I was looking at the finish positions for each race and the delta between Lewis and Valtteri. It was 5 seconds here, 8 seconds there, 6 seconds here, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then if Valtteri had trouble and finished down in 8th or something, obviously it was more. But when it was a 1-2 is what I was looking for. Yeah. And so 22 seconds doesn't really get it. And I think it's pretty tough for Sergio to overcome that. And I think it also, this goes back to, and we talked about it last week a little bit, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the reality of it is that what we're witnessing is exceptional performance from a team that is firing on all cylinders, a car that is clearly a superior car on that grid, and I would argue a driver who is in his absolute prime and delivering a sublime driving performance. And I don't think you can separate one from the other, but yes, I think the Red Bull car is clearly the class of the field, as evidenced by Sergio Perez, right? But the delta between Sergio and Max is quite dramatic. So, and speaking of Max, he started sixth. Many expected him to be in the lead after just a lap or two, but it took him a little longer to sort of architect a safe path through, what arguably is pretty quick cars ahead of him. And he eventually got there, got past Sergio for the lead, pulled out that gap. It's Max's, eighth or ninth straight win. I think it's his eighth. The team's 12th straight win. And a significant marker on the first half of, like I said, an exceptional season so far, Red Bull. I think there was, a lot of people were laughing and making a lot of comments about his radio communication with GP. I think Max, in the heat of anger, I think that can happen. And certainly if you're an F1 fan, you've heard Kimi's radio communications with his race engineer. And how about Yuki? I mean, he's F-bombing and calling everybody names. Lewis has gotten chippy in the past for sure. Charles does. Lando can get snippy over the radio.
Right, for sure.
And I think in the heat of the moment, it happens. But I will say Max is more Yuki than he is George Russell, I think, or Fernando, right? He can get a little chippy out there. And Yuki is kind of over the top.
Yeah, I think the difference in the communication wasn't from Max, because I think Max is always like that.
He's always been that way.
He's going to question. I think it was literally the engineer getting kind of tired of the constant conversation, having the second, second guess himself, and then explain it to Max why you can't do this or why this and that. Maybe it's it's a long season, right? A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And I can understand. I've dealt with a lot of drivers, and some drivers are easier to handle than others. Some are a bit more temperamental. Some are a bit more, questioning of things and demanding. And Max is definitely that. And I think, the engineer is a human being, and he doesn't also like to be, belittled or whatever, and ignored. He's a part of a team. The team, is part of Max's success too. And although on the other hand, it doesn't, Max doesn't make many bad calls either from inside the cockpit.
Right.
And sometimes, even though it's a little painful and a little irritating and causes some friction, sometimes drivers of world championship stature have to do this.
Right.
To get what they want. And it may not be like, hey, he's a warm and cuddly fuddly guy, let's go go give Max a hug, but his temperament and his ideology and pushing everybody gets the success that he wants. And obviously there can be a balance there where but the engineer has a right to call his point of view too, and make demands as well. It seems to me like you nearly won in the end, because sometimes Max is like, no, give me more tires, I want to get the fastest lap, and they're like, no, we're just not going to do that.
Not going to happen. Yeah. And the thing is, if you go back and listen to Max's radio communication, 2018, 2019, whatever it was, versus today, there's a marked difference in his overall, I would say, racecraft and race view. To your point, he doesn't come on and say a lot of times just completely bonehead, ridiculous stuff.
Right.
He knows what's going on, and he knows what's going on in the race, and he knows his race, and he knows his car and what his car feels like, right? Yeah. So he's trying to give that feedback, and he's trying to work with the team to orchestrate a win. I noticed that a couple of years ago when I thought his radio communication just seemed a little bit more on it, a little more, that's, pretty sharp. And it's something I noticed with George Russell too.
Yeah.
George has a way of radioing things that he wants that's definitely for George's
very politically
definitely for George's benefit, right? Not so much Lewis, but definitely for George, right? So George kind of knows that a little bit too. So it's different when you listen to the drivers, the amount of feedback and the kind of things they say. Anyway, I agree with you on that with Max.
Yeah, and I think sometimes he needs to have something to shoot for to keep him awake
Yeah,
in a
right
way.
at this point.
You
Yeah,
know, I mean, it's like he really would want to have come in, done another pit stop, and then gone for
yeah, he would
fastest
have.
lap because he wanted a challenge.
Yeah,
He's so underneath the challenge at this point because the car is so good and he's so good in that car that yeah, he just sometimes you need a little slap around the face just to keep you in the moment, you know? And I
yeah,
think that's kind of
right,
what he was searching for, really. That's what he always searches for.
right. Speaking of slap in the face,
No, it cannot be, Ricky.
I look today. I'm trying to hold it up for Carlos.
Yes.
I'm
Good for
wearing
you.
my Spain polo. I'm trying to represent here, Chile, but ooh, tough race for Carlos. Well, anyway, Ferrari, Charles Leclerc in P3, Carlos Sainz at DNF. Tale of two races, really. Carlos looked, I don't know. He locked up as Lewis was on the left of Carlos. They were on the left side of the track. He locked up, I think, as they started a concertina with Lewis braking and Carlos went in a little hot, started to brake, dipped out right not to touch Lewis is what you do. It's what you would do.
Yeah.
So he went right, came into the middle, saw the apex, dove down sharp, cut across towards the apex to take the
Yeah.
apex and go out, right?
Right.
And so, unfortunately, as he came right, he looked to have a clear shot to a tighter line to the apex, but the only problem was Oscar was there. We thought he had clear sailing to the inside of the corner in the apex as well. He saw Carlos coming. He came dashing across the track towards that corner. He really didn't have any place to go. I think he was trying to brake. It wasn't like he was trying to spear into to Carlos.
Yeah.
And then I went back and looked at both the onboards. I could see from their view where it looked like, so Lewis locks up, and from Carlos's view, whoa, it's almost like, whoa, there's the brakes, went out right, saw the corner, went for the apex, right? It all happens in a fraction of a second. From Oscar's standpoint, they take off. He's right alongside of Carlos. I mean, he's right there. And he sees Carlos over to his left, and he sees this big open area in front of him to the corner. And he's got plenty of room to brake, and he's going to go in there. And from Oscar's side, I could kind of see where he thought, I'm just going to take that line. Carlos is to my left. I'm here. I'm going to take that line. But anyway, how'd you see it, Paul? You're a driver. I'm not.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think Oscar, he wasn't quite alongside. I mean, he was on the rear tire. I wouldn't call it that, but I think at the start of a race, you need to kind of stay in your lane. And I think Carlos cut across because something happened in front of him without really checking for traffic, so to speak. He had a little lock up on the front, so his steering ability was gone a little bit. So I think he was just trying to straighten the car up and dive down to the apex a little bit, which wasn't his immediate trajectory until that moment, which is kind of why Piastri was on the inside in his lane. So that's why, at the start of the race, especially down into La Source, you just can't be erratic. You can't start crabbing across your line at the last second because everyone's in there. You got to kind of stay in your lane and get through La Source and then head up there. So realistically, you should have stayed in that middle lane, gone around La Source and then headed up in the middle, going up into Eau Rouge. But by just kind of chopping down to the apex, which everyone's like, oh, he's always entitled to the apex. Yes, but is that the right move to do at that moment in time at the start of a race when you cannot be completely aware of where everyone is? And I would say no.
Ant Davison made a point on one of his reviews of the skyboard thing there. But he was saying that the problem with that corner La Source, it becomes a pinch point very
Right.
easily on starts.
Right. Very, very
Because-
much like turn one at Coda also.
Exactly. So everybody on the left side of the tracks heads down to the source. If you're going to dive sharply for the apex, you're going to pinch everyone in the middle or on the right-hand side of the track.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so if you're going down the left side, it's better to stay out wide, just as you suggested. Stay out on the left side, take a wider, and go through there. Because if you dive down sharp to pinch that apex, you're going to pinch everybody that's on the
You're
inside,
putting yourself in jeopardy, right?
and you put your race in jeopardy. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And
well, I
and
agree with him then.
yeah, and plenty
As
of
usual.
people have done it. You know, Max Verstappen famously went down, dove down the inside, you know, and hit somebody as he was trying to crawl around the curb and the apex there. You know, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he should just slow down and wave Piastri by.
No.
But it was literally like that much room. If you give him a little bit more room, and that's it, stayed in his lane just that little bit more,
Yeah.
they ought to have got around the corner. Oliver wouldn't have got round Sainz would have finished the race and probably would have actually got the run on Hamilton coming out. But
Right.
he did not.
Yep. So, you know, I don't know. That's kind of how I saw it too. I think Carlos, you know, Lewis was on the outside. Carlos got caught out a little bit. He was in the middle. Oscar was on the inside. Kind of a racing incident. It's kind of how I saw the Lewis and Sergio thing on the prior day.
I've been many occasions in races where you get a start and you know there's people all over the place left and right, and you try to get down to the apex, but you just don't just try and eat it up because you know everyone's around you, so you got to be predictable so you can get around the corner and get on with the race.
Yeah. Charles had a good start. Didn't have the pace to hold off the Red Bulls in the end. He ends up holding on to third, though. So he kept Lewis at bay, which was good. Charles managed to get out of Lewis's DRS zone after the first stop, which was good. And perhaps, I don't know, the good sign, and I'm not trying to be a Ferrari fanboy, but perhaps the good sign is, apart from the better pace at Spa, which they clearly seem to have, was maybe the lack of the Ferraris chewing their tires off the back of the car.
Right.
Which I thought was good. They were not only just quick on the medium and soft compound, but they were also quick on the wet tires too, on the rain tires too. And I think that was a good sign that they weren't just chewing the rear tires off the car, which they have a penchant for doing, that they were quick on rain tires and dry tires, and it didn't leave them red-faced exiting Belgium, which is good.
Yeah, no, that is good. By the way, did you look at when they finished the sprint race and they looked at the rain tires between the Red Bull and the McLaren? How different they were?
Yeah. Yes.
That was a telltale sign how good that Red Bull car is. But anyway,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, back to Leclerc. Yeah, I think I think some of the teams are fiddling around with stuff and learning some other things. I think Haas actually are doing a bit better on that too. So some things being learned from the tire. But yeah, it looked touch and go there for a minute. It looked like Lewis was going to catch Leclerc, but then it kind of stabilized, and I think that was Lewis's one stab at it, and I think Charles pretty much had him covered, but he certainly didn't have anything for the Red Bulls, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, let's talk about Lewis. Lewis Hamilton finished P4, George Russell in P6. A P4 and P6, just exactly where they finished a week ago in Hungary. To be honest, I kind of entered this weekend, and maybe it was the rain and all that on Friday and Saturday. I kind of thought Merck might do slightly better here than they actually did. And I kind of thought the sprint race kind of suggested that as well. So I don't know. I was a little, I wasn't stunned or anything. I just thought they may have a little more pace here. I picked
stunned.
No. He's not dead. He's just stunned. You stunned him just as he's waking up. He's pining for the fjord. Sorry for the Monty Python segue. Yeah. I was thinking that they'd do a little better. Lewis did well in the sprint race. Lewis looked pretty quick all weekend. I had picked him for a podium finish. I thought they might be a little quicker, and they weren't. It kind of turned into a lonely race for Lewis, to be honest with you. It looked like exactly what you said, Paul. It looked like he kind of made a charge, cut about a second out of that lead that Charles had on him. But then I think the team measured it, said, it isn't going to happen. Let's just take Max's fastest lap, which was cheeky, and it was a great move. I love they did that. And Lewis had plenty of time just to stop, put on a set of mediums, and go for it. So that was good. But, I kind of thought maybe Lewis might be up there a little higher. I thought maybe the car. And Lewis said after the race, he said that the bouncing for him was back.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say that. It's even in the wet. I noticed that the car started to porpoise quite a bit and bounce. Only in the Mercedes, though, as far as I could tell.
Yeah,
so obviously they haven't completely solved that issue with their performance. So I think they may have been fighting that a little bit. And I think, a track like Spa is probably going to pronounce it if it's still there. So I think they were learning a few lessons, that they've still got some lessons and fixes to do with their car, which probably in the end might be a good thing, because they have a little bit of a layover now, and maybe they could readdress that situation. But definitely there was something not quite working 100% on that car, which probably led to Russell not feeling as comfortable also, which he kind of struggled quite a bit.
Yeah, I think he struggled Friday and Saturday, and then on Sunday he kind of felt like maybe he could have been up there at least with Lewis and possibly fighting for a podium. I think he felt like he was a little quicker. And I am a little curious on the whole George thing. It got me just sort of reflecting on the balance, or not the balance of, but the first half of the season for him. I'm curious about what's going on with George, how he went from Mr. Saturday to now always being on the back foot, starting midfield and having to engage heroics to get back towards the sharp end of the grid and behind Lewis. I mean, that's not the George we saw last year.
Right.
And I don't know exactly. Something is off on George's side of the garage, and they need to figure that out and quick, because the team, in my mind, and I'm not casting aspersions, but in my mind, the team will be perfectly comfortable with him trundling around like Bottas behind Lewis. They'll be fine with that. But that can't be fine for George.
Yeah, I don't think they're really fine with that, because I think they want both of them to be fighting it out. They're not looking for Russell just to be the backup to Lewis. I don't think so.
Yeah, they don't want another Nico Lewis thing.
No, they don't want that either. But I think they know that Russell, they're getting Russell ready to take over, even though it may not be for a couple of years. They still need him. They don't want to beat him down. But something is missing for sure. Whether it's him personally, he nearly admitted it was his problem, but didn't quite.
Yeah.
Because why would you? Russell's a smart guy. But there's definitely something not syncing within himself with that car as it sits right there. And maybe Lewis has seen so many things in his past, he's able to deal with the little changes as they go along. But also saying, when Russell came on board, Lewis was struggling with the car that wasn't perfect.
He was. Yeah.
And Russell was able to do a bit more with it. So
he was.
It's hard to know. Maybe Lewis is just pinching all his engineers or surveying his data somehow. I don't know. But definitely something awry.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be able to pinpoint it, but I also don't think that that car is 100% making the use of everything it has at this point.
I mean, he's not in Sergio territory.
You like my face? You like it?
Yeah, he's not there. But
No, he's not there yet.
Anyway, all right, let's talk about Aston Martin. Let's talk about the green team, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's see. Lance Stroll P9, Fernando Alonso P5. Fernando had a good start, decent pace, managed to get up to fifth, where he created a nice gap for himself up there, sort of to insulate, and then he consolidated that P5. I think it was a really good run for Fernando. From his point, I was kind of reading what he had to say. He was able to he said, well, we're able to keep one Mercedes and one McLaren behind us, so that's good. It's so Fernando, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he was, he's moving the right direction. Look, he was on the podium 6 of the first 8 races, folks. Right?
Seems a while back now, doesn't it?
Seems a little while ago. And so getting back up to P5, at least he's moving in the right direction.
Right.
Lots of commentary on the broadcast about, the upgrades. We just found out the upgrades that the Aston Martin went backwards, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to survey my crack report.
Yeah.
For some reason I got on that list. I don't know.
Your crack report?
My crack report, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I like just crack report. I like that better. Hey, Paul, give us your crack report. How's that working for you?
So I don't know what they're, we thought maybe they wouldn't have the depth to be able to move along with as things do, but also things aren't moving as quickly as they used to because of the financial situation. All the teams have to stay under that bubble. So
yeah, right.
I didn't think they'd lose the plot either. So I think 5th place a year and a half ago, Aston Martin would be elated with that kind of pace, but because of what they've had in the beginning, it seems kind of like, okay, that's okay. But Alonso's not going to be very happy with that because he saw chances to win races, and now pretty far off of that. And Aston Martin are gradually sinking out of constructors down and may end up 4th in the end by the time McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes pull everything out. So
yeah,
we'll have to see on that. Once again, the second driver is more a signature of how good or bad the car is.
Yeah, well, speaking of that second driver, Lance, it was a beautiful segue, man.
To you.
Thank you. I'll take it. It was wonderful. Lance did a long first stint going on a one-stopper. He yo-yoed through the field and said that in hindsight, he really felt that the two-stopper would have been a better strategy for him. I think he's probably right. Lance, I'll tell you what did catch me out a little bit was on Saturday. Lance has typically been really good in those changing conditions situations. So it was a bit of a surprise to me to watch him ball it up and SQ2 on Saturday. So a little, not so much.
Not so much. I mean, he's done pretty good in changing conditions, but that was really just, that corner was super tricky. And he was the only person to try it on slicks, and it wasn't like he had like 3 or 4 laps to build up to actually having to put a lap down. They kind of sent him out there at the last second. Slicks, you got 1 lap, do it. Go. Lance. Yeah. And in that corner, I think it just wasn't ready for that tire. And I don't think anyone in that car could have got away with getting through the no-name corner.
It's not just Lance. No human could have got through there.
No human could have done it.
We're not picking on Lance.
Yeah. So especially on the medium tire also.
Yeah, very tough on a medium.
Yeah, I think literally the track just was not ready, and he was obviously under the pressure of putting that 1 lap down. So
yeah,
it was nearly a foregone conclusion before he got there, really.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's what you'd like to think.
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would.
I guess I would.
I'm gonna think the best of it.
Okay.
Let's get down to McLaren. Lando Norris in P7, Oscar Piastri at DNF. Belgium was a case of, maybe, I'm not trying to be critical here, but maybe a little bit of case of coming back down to earth for McLaren a little bit. And I think that's okay. They made great strides in the last 3 races, no doubt about it. But they also know where this car's weaknesses are.
Yeah.
They were hoping for rain, no doubt about it, which could have favored their high downforce rear wing because that's the setup the car had. And this gets us into that whole thing. A lot of their wind tunnel time, development time was spent on all the aero and underfloor and all that stuff. It's not like they spent that time coming up with 8 different rear wings that could take to 8 different circuits. So this is the rear wing they had, right? And so I think that is kind of how it played out for them. If you consider Oscar and Lando's pace in S2, Sector 2 is what I mean, they were on par, or at least close to Red Bull's pace. And that's about 50% of the lap at Spa. So they were hoping, I'm guessing here in my mind, they were hoping that they could make that rear wing work because it represented a very quick sector that was worth 50% of that time. Just hoping they could hang in there. Didn't do it. That's why they were probably looking for rain, because that would neuter the other 2 sectors a little bit, and it would have played into their hands. Unfortunately, Oscar never got to see this and what his car could have done because of the first turn
Because that
incident.
first lap nutter Sainz took him out.
That first lap nutter. He never got to see it. I'm sure that's what Mark Webber said watching that. But Lando struggled early on, stopped early for hards. Those did not work on that car. Boxed him again. Then he went the distance on those soft. Now, this was where the Lando-ness came in here. They boxed him, put him on softs. And one thing that I was intrigued about, Paul, is all the cars that, and I'm assuming that the track just got better and better over time, but all those cars that started on soft compounds didn't do really well on those first stints, on those softs. But all the cars on their final stint, those softs were great, right? And Lando, on that set of softs for his final stop, they asked him, okay, we're going to go to the end on these. And he did a great job of managing those tires, taking them all the way. He started passing all kinds of cars and got up there and finished in P7. So it was, I think, strategy-wise, great strategy, and drive-wise, I think it was a great execution.
Yeah, I don't think strategy-wise it was great, but I think he made up for the call on hards, right?
Oh, yeah, that. I'm talking about to go to the end of the race on the softs.
Oh, gotcha.
Strategy
The readjustment of bad strategy.
Readjustment of the bad strategy, yes.
Yeah. I think I applaud him for going all in because, as you said, they know their strengths and weaknesses, and they knew they were going to have a draggy car. And so if you're going to go for it, you just go for it. If you start compromising and try and make up a little bit, then you lose all of your assets, right? Then you're just driving a compromised car. So why not go in there with a high downforce car into a lower down and bank on the weather being bad, which it kind of was for the most part.
Yeah, right.
You know, if it had been wet, they would have been heroes, and they would have been both cars on a podium possibly, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So that was, they only had one grenade, so they threw it out there. So I don't think that was bad. I think Norris did a great job in coming back from a bad call and a car that really wasn't working, even in that first stint either, right?
Yeah.
Let alone when the hards. I mean, he started going backwards pretty quick, and for him to have the pit stops that he did on the tire choice that he did at the beginning and come back in that second half of the race and score points, I thought was actually a pretty phenomenal drive.
Yeah, he had said after the race in the interview he couldn't pass anyone, and when I say he passed everyone, I mean by staying out, they all boxed, which meant that he went, straight by like 10 cars, right? So that's what I mean by when he passed. So yeah, absolutely, it was well executed for sure. So a very deserved P7 for Lando.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's get to Alpine. You had Pierre Gasly in P11, Esteban Ocon P8. A better weekend than last weekend for sure, with both cars finishing, one of them in the points. And then you had Pierre Gasly in a terrific P3 result in the sprint race on Saturday, which is great. Pierre, certainly I was hoping for better than P11. For Pierre, but there was a couple things that worked against him. He got held up pretty badly behind Oscar.
Big time. I watched that in the replays when I'm like, oh my God, he lost at least 5-6 places in that.
He did. He got
and there's
held
nothing
up
Oscar
bad.
could do. I was like, well, let me look see what Oscar could have done to help him. But Oscar got off the track as quickly as he could. But.
Yeah, he really did. And it was just unfortunate, one of those, as luck would have it sort of thing. Pierre got held up badly behind Oscar. As he impeded him through Rouge. And then Pierre had that slow pit stop, and that really hurt him for his one-stop strategy and left a tremendous amount of work to do. And it's a shame because I do think Pierre absolutely would have been a top 10, and he had a really nice pass on Albon on the outside. So yeah, I feel bad. It was a great Saturday for Pierre, and I think he would have been thereabouts in the race too if it hadn't been for those two situations.
Yeah, I think the good thing is he did come away with points. Because of the sprint race,
right?
Or we can't call it a race, but it's a point scoring race, so we'll call it a race. But P11, probably outside of what his actual true potential was for sure. I thought he actually drove really well the whole weekend. So
yeah, he did.
It was a shame for him not to score double points in the two races.
Yeah. Ocon had better luck. Good recovery drive from where he started. to get all the way back up in P8. Said it was good to get in the points. Felt like the car, they finished pretty much kind of where he was hoping, somewhere up in the points, and that's where he finished. So I thought it was a good drive for him too.
Yeah, good drive. I think, ultimately the car was a bit better than it finished overall. So, but I think P8 probably was the best. Maybe they could have beaten the McLaren probably if they'd done things perfectly. But yeah, about where that car was, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see, AlphaTauri, Daniel Ricciardo, P16, Yuki Tsunoda, and P10. Dan said that he wasn't convinced they'd got the peak grip out of their tires, and that once they were in clean air, they were a lot better, but couldn't really perform in traffic. So he settled for P16 after starting P19 is his excuse, Paul. That's what he said. Due to his starting position, they started Dan on softs, and I don't know, maybe that plus quite a bit of traffic, and even the team boss Francois said that Dan really got hung up in a lot of traffic. That cost him a lot, and then he started on softs, which I just mentioned a moment ago, that those that started on soft didn't fare very well. So maybe that's what happened to his race.
Yeah, it hasn't really shown much. He's shown glimpses of being fast in certain aspects of the race, but actually doesn't get the result. Maybe it's what the team call. Yeah, do you start off in softs and try and make 3 or 4 positions, or do you go off on a harder compound and try and outlast the competition when you're starting that far back?
Yeah,
it can work both ways. It didn't work out that way for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess some of that boils down to what you expect the tire degradation will be.
Right.
What you would do. Let's see what else. I'm not exactly sure what the trouble is with Yuki. He seemed to hang in there with the quick cars around him for a good portion of the day. But then it seemed to fade away from him. He just kind of got sort of drifting backwards a little bit. And thanks to 2 DNFs ahead of him, he ends up in the points for a P10, so he gets a point. The team's first point since April.
Yikes.
So unless you're going to consistently score points, I don't think that 1 point really means much to the team. But given that everybody else is scoring more points with more consistency, so good for Yuki though, getting up in the points. But I'm not. Yeah, I didn't have time to go back and kind of see why he may have just drifted back. I thought he was a little more.
He was pretty handy, I'd say, for like 2/3 of the race, and then I think that just that last little third of the race, he just lost pace, or everyone else gained pace, and it was tire corrected, whatever they were doing. But yeah, it definitely fell back when you thought he was actually moving forward, and then all of a sudden some light switch came on. He started heading backwards instead of forward. So
that's what kind of caught me out. Let's see, Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas in P12, Joe Guan Yu in P13. Joe said he was struggling with brake issues for much of the race. But did seem that they had better dry weather pace than the previous days running in the sprint race. And in particular, I think Joe's final stint was actually really good. He was gaining a lot of positions, got all the way up to 13, making some good passes on that final stint. So really that first half of the race, I think he struggled quite a bit.
Car came alive, I guess.
And then kind of came alive on the last set of tires. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Bottas opted for 2 sets of mediums instead of softs, and when everyone else kind of late in the race went for the softs, and I think that was tough. He did have some decent battles mid-race with Albon and the Haas duo, but he couldn't keep the Alpines behind him, and even with 2 DNFs ahead of him, couldn't get in the points. So,
I blame the mustache,
not the mullet.
He's got to shave that thing off. Let's get back to clean-shaven Bottas when he was
He's vacationing in Colorado.
Yeah,
I'm going to get the car, just drive out to Colorado and drive all over Colorado and try to find him.
He's bear hunting or something, probably grapple him.
I think he's going to go get nude again in a river somewhere in the mountains. I don't know. That's what he does.
Beating himself with reeds.
Yeah, I don't know.
I used to be somebody.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Williams. Shall we talk about Williams? Can we talk about him? Sure. Let's see. Alex Albon, P14, Logan Sargent, P17. At first, Alex looked set for points to me.
Mm-hmm.
Had a good race, very fast car down the straights, but he started struggling with a lot of tire wear, and he ended up 3-stopping, leaving him out of the points, down in P14. And he was surprised how much degradation they were getting on the tires in the middle stint. He said they had a lot of degradation, so that was very difficult to watch because they had that pace, but in traffic, that tire wear started to come in.
Yeah, there should have been a track where their straight line speed really kind of gave them a shot at it, but they just didn't. Maybe they went too far in trying to enhance their straight line speed, and that would ensue some tire wear issues as the tire life gets older, right? Without the downforce that they're playing with. So maybe they just one trick pony didn't cut it for Spa. But I am surprised that is the case, because Williams have been getting it right more than they've been getting it wrong, and certainly Albon has too. So I did actually expect them to be fighting for points easily this weekend.
Yeah, I thought Alex would for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Logan suffered similar fate, went long, but then he was undercut, dropping him to the back. It's interesting because neither one of their cars liked the medium compounds in particular. And one presumes that the softs would have been worse maybe if the mediums were bad, but I don't know. Well, maybe they wouldn't.
No way of knowing.
Guess we'll never find out. So anyway, and then finally you down in Haas, got Nico Hulkenberg in P14, Kevin Magnussen P17. Nico started from pit lane, a new engine, but even that couldn't get him into the points. Nico started on the mediums while Kevin started on softs. Ultimately, both of them had some good midfield battles, but lacked the pace to hang in there in the points position, and then they really started suffering with tire degradation for both of them. The tire degradation was very high. Given their pace, I think there was more there to give. The tires wouldn't really put up with it, although I think they've been worse on tires.
Yes.
So
I would say they're getting there. Yeah, I think they're getting their head around it a little bit on the tire deck, because yes, it's still not great, but it's not as catastrophic as it was at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But they also may be giving up some of that ultimate pace, which is why maybe Hulkenberg couldn't put down a flyer. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but I definitely think they're getting better at managing that tire wear, but I think they may be compromising the car. But I think ultimately the results are a bit better. So maybe they can go back to the drawing board, build on what they've learned, and somehow try to scrape a result somewhere out of this car. Because the drivers aren't the problem. The car's the problem.
That's what I was just going to say. You get two veteran drivers. They're trying very hard. I know the team, the entire team is working really hard. So in my mind, it's down to Gunther. And I'm not saying anything, Gunther, but there happens to be a team boss that's available now. You know.
Yep.
Got Artmar lurking. He's an American. That
there's been some consistency to their pace, and Gunther's been around the whole time. So, when they're talking about, we're going to sign Hulkenberg, well, let's see how Magnussen does. It's like, no, you already threw out other drivers, and they weren't the problem either. Well, one of them was. But, fix the car.
Yeah.
Fix the car.
Agree. All right, let's hand out some awards. We always do that. First award of the race is Move of the Race.
Seriously, Todd?
Seriously. What'd you have? Move of the race for you?
I got the outside move. I'm giving it to everybody.
Yeah,
I think there's some fun stuff there. Obviously, with DRS passes on the straightaway, pretty easy.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of last second dives into corners side by side that I really appreciated. My favorite one was the Gasly one, because it literally took 4 corners to shake out, and braking on the outside. Into that, what's that corner called? At the end of the Kemmel Straight, but I can't remember the name.
Lacombe.
Yeah, but keeping the car under control in there, and then both of them might be able to make it through.
Yeah,
I thought it was impressive. It was fun to watch. I thought it was great.
It was terrific. I also had an outside pass. I had Lando at Rivage on Logan Sargent on the outside.
Yeah.
But all those non-DRS outside passes were a lot of fun to watch.
They were, and there was one at Blanchimont. I can't remember who did that one.
Yeah.
It might be in a Haas or something, but yeah, it was good. It was good. Good fun to watch.
A lot of good passing, non-DRS passing. It was a lot of fun to watch. All right, next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Oh boy, Paul.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is Donkey of the Race, and I was thinking, oh, it's a Carlos and Oscar. What's funny is you and I both end up with the same one. We didn't coordinate this, but we got on to record the podcast. I said, "Who's the dog of the race?" We both were like Alpine.
Alpine management, leadership, should we say? Yeah, timing is everything. Your timing was crap.
That was
not
crap.
cool. Not cool.
Not cool. Pretty stunning. You fire Otmar, he's been there 18 months. Your problems go beyond that. And then Alan Permain, who's been there for over 3 decades, and stuck with that team when nobody else was. That's pretty brutal, to say the least.
The way they did it too. It was like,
well, why would you, just wait till Monday after the summer break starts and let everybody quietly, but to your point you made before the podcast was, to do it during the race weekend, and now they're all just onslaught of questions that they got to answer, and it's a tough position to put Alan and Otmar in anyway.
Yeah.
Very
Unfair.
bad. Yep. Let's see. And finally, drive of the race.
Get down.
All right.
All right, I'm going to pick everyone's favorite Twitch driver, and that is Lando Norris.
Yeah. I had Charles, Max, Orlando, and probably Lando for that long stint on softs that he made work.
As I said, I think he flattered the team's calls, and I think he really executed and got himself points that maybe his team didn't deserve, but he did.
Yeah, he even said over the race, I don't even know how I got in 7. I felt like I came in last. So for all you out there, you guys are just a bunch of Max Verstappen, sycophants. No, Max had a great race, but Lando, I think, did something special there. I thought that was worthy of pointing out for driving the race. Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
Got some fun mailbag. The first up, Paul,
yes,
is from our friends, John and Samantha. He said, John says this. He said, my wife and I have a question for Paul.
Yes.
Not for me. I'm not weighing in. It ain't for me, Paul. It's just for you. Do you know when or if Heart of Racing will be doing some merch? We would love to buy some stuff to show our support for the best team in IMSA. Thanks for all 3 of you, what you do for the podcast and F1 community. Well, thanks, John Smith. It's very kind of you to say that. And Paul, I as well would like to know what is up with Heart of Racing merch.
I would like to know that too. I've had conversations about it left, right, and center. So here's what I'm going to try and do is anyone that wants something, send an email to me with their shirt size, and I'll try and take care of them.
There you go.
Right? Yeah. There's some things with selling merchandise, and it's a charity, and the whole.
Oh, yeah.
It's so. I might be able to send something people's way, and if they just promise to throw something at the charity would be good. It's just this, it's a more complicated than I can even think about. But
I didn't think about that. But
trying to get around.
Yeah.
So
maybe we need some good logos and JPEGs, and people can go make their own shirts.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go. But if anyone out there that is supporters of the Harder Racing team, as I said, just drop me a line, and we'll try and figure something out.
There you go. All right, John Smith, there's your answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for the kind word.
Absolutely. And thanks for recognizing we're the best team in IMSA.
Well, yes. Yes, of course you are. Yeah. Let's see. Mr. Drury asked this of cars and wind tunnels, is what he's talking about. Can a wind tunnel be set up to replicate dirty air? And if so, do teams lower down the pack focus strongly or more strongly on this particular aspect? Or do most focus on the clean air driving? Given how often we see the cars don't run well in dirty air, it tells me that this must be a difficult aspect to recreate. So I think they can or do simulate a disruption of the onset flow of air to the car in a wind tunnel. I think they do that. And you definitely can do that in CFD for sure. And I recall, Paul, when Mercedes was dominating everything for 8 years, I recall them being so dominant that they seemed to really struggle when they were actually in traffic, right?
Right. Yeah.
It does leave you thinking that they designed that car to run in clean air because they knew they would be running in clean air.
Right. More often than not. And then there's always going to be a compromise for a car that's going to run in dirty air, mainly in drag and a bit more extra downforce than maybe is optimum for a car on a single lap on its own or out in clean air. I think also the wind tunnels can replicate to somewhat the dirty air, but every car that they follow sends a different reverberation of dirty air. And if I don't know if anyone's looked into the German touring car series, but a few years ago, the teams spent a lot of development in making their air dirty. Literally not just about making their cars faster, but literally making the disturbance behind their car so bad that people couldn't close up on them, and they do that in Formula One too. Although that's why the rules have become as strict as they are to try and kick this aside. So yes, they can, but every car they get behind is going to send off a different wash in a different way. So it's really just about compromise, and do you want to make that compromise? And Red Bull, for instance, don't need to make that compromise right now, so they can maximize their car's performance without having to worry about how that will actually work when you're following another car, because they never do.
Yeah, good question though.
Yeah, it is a great question.
Next question from our friend Sandra.
Okay.
And Sandra asked this. This is a question for both of you. Sandra says, which do you think would be better for the sport, removing DRS or bringing back multiple tire manufacturers? Love the pod, by the way. Well, thank you very much, Sandra, for listening to the podcast. What do you think, Paul?
I would say multiple tire manufacturers.
You think that'd be better for the sport?
I think it would do for the sport what they're trying to do, but make it more organic, right?
Are you saying do away with DRS and bring in the multiple manufacturers?
I think you could do both, but if I thought the question was
if you have to pick one,
right. If I had to pick one, I'd pick multiple manufacturers, because that would actually do what
DRS would like to do.
Yeah, they want to make the races exciting. They want something different happen, and with different manufacturers bringing in different tires, cars and with different performance at different times in the cycle of a tire, tires that could maybe last longer. So the strategies could change versus the tire that's maybe fast. The manufacturer that's got a fast tire but it won't last. I think it would really switch things up and maybe add a bit of turmoil more organically than try and manipulate turmoil by all the stupid rules they've come up with.
Yeah. I'm not, and it's a great question, Senator, because I'm not a fan of DRS or high degradation tires. I don't like either of them.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, the high degradation is the same for everyone, and that's true. So of the two, I don't like DRS more than I don't like HD tires. Yes. But I don't really like HD tires either. And I would rather...
But if you've got multiple manufacturers building the tires, that doesn't necessarily make them high deg tires either, right?
No, and I think if you had multiple manufacturers, one manufacturer would be trying hard not to be so easy to wear out, right?
Right. The thing with what F1 told Pirelli they want to do is to make these tires not necessarily easy to deal with. Whereas if you've got two manufacturers, they're trying to make the tires easy to deal with so they can beat the other manufacturer, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a good tire war would be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
But great question, Sandra. Thanks for sending that in. Steven asks, he says, a longtime listener, but first time supporter and poster. Well, thank you very, very much, Steven. First off, thanks for all the hard work that goes in your podcast. Thank you very much for those kind words. And as an oddball who is both a Lewis fan since his rookie year and a Max fan since his rookie year, I must say you did an amazing job in 2021 with your commentary and were more objective than any other podcast I listened to. Well, Steven is incredibly kind of you. I got accused of being, anti-Lewis. I got accused of being anti-Max. I get accused of being racist and all that.
It is funny because we actually got both those comments from the same podcast.
We did. Yeah, we had one podcast where the comments for that podcast, one said, "Oh, you're such anti-Lewis racist," and the other one was like, "Oh, you're just a bunch of Lewis sycophants and fanboys," from the same podcast. It was amazing. So I like them both. I think Lewis is awesome. I think Max is awesome. I like them both. Question for you. What are your favorite driver-engineer pairings to listen to over the radio via the in-car feeds? The radio between Max and his engineer particularly spicy this past race, but I particularly enjoy hearing technical details like Lando's setting fast lap in Austria 2020 is a great example I can recall.
Yeah.
Paul, you do a lot more onboard watching and radio listening than I do during the race. Is there one that kind of stands out to you think is kind of an interesting?
Well, yeah, it depends which way you look at things. Are you looking for entertainment value or for knowledge value?
Yuki's entertaining.
Yeah, Yuki's, well, he's annoying, irritating.
Yeah.
I mean, he does. Yeah, I don't find him entertaining. I find him abrasive, but but I get why people want to listen to that.
Yeah,
that style. So I mean, we always loved Kimi and his engineer.
Yeah,
that was always fun too. So yeah, it depends on if you're looking for technical feedback data people or just entertaining back and forth. So I actually think Lewis is pretty entertaining with how he deals with his engineers. Right now, I would probably say Russell.
I think I was just gonna say George Russell for me is the interesting one.
Yeah,
because he's almost like the stuff he says is almost like he's trying to sit on the pit wall with him,
Yeah, right.
And come up with the strategy and
And I think his engineer, I don't know his name, works pretty well with Russell and understands that as well.
Yeah.
And I think they both sit in the hotel room and go, okay, how are we going to do it this time?
Right.
It's us against the other side of the garage, basically. So I think that's technically it's pretty interesting conversations back and forth. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. I like the George radio quite a bit. Let's see. A good question. And thanks so much, Stephen, for the kind words. Really do appreciate it. Miles asks, during the race, James Val said that they struggle running in dirty air because they don't design their car that way. Why not?
Yeah.
Well, I would say, and I'm guessing, I don't know, James, and I haven't talked to anybody at Williams, but I'm guessing, in my mind, watching what happened to Williams in this race weekend in particular, was that their car was very fast when trimmed out. It's an incredibly slippery car through the air and really fast down the straight. So I think they were banking on that. I think the issue that I seem to see was that when the Williams was in traffic, the knock-on effect, they had much higher tire wear than what they were anticipating. So I don't know that I think maybe, I'm guessing, and Paul, you may know far better than I would, but is what he was saying is that their car was struggling running in that dirty air, and they didn't design it to run in dirty air to prevent the amount of tire wear they were getting.
Yeah, it's, as I said, it's, to fight dirty air, there are certain things you can maybe do with the sculpture of the car, but basically, you're adding more downforce than the car ultimately needs for its single best lap, right? So counteract the loss of downforce and it doesn't start sliding around. With the Williams car, it's a one-trick pony right now. I think Valls is going to come around, but right now he's working with what he has, and the one trick is it's really fast in a straight line, so they kind of have to go all in on that. Right now. And as I said, if you've got a car with limited downforce anyway, and you put that in dirty air, then it's really going to start sliding around. So they're hoping to run the car in clean air. They're hoping to make this design work at tracks where dirty air isn't as big an issue, so they can make advantage of that at those few races and grab all the points they can. And we've spoke about this many times, where when you're a lower echelon team with limited budget, you target a few races in the year to try and grab your points, rather than trying to make an all-round car that's going to score points every weekend, because you just don't have that depth right yet. As I said, I think Valls is gonna get there, but it also doesn't happen in a day. So I think their car is a low downforce, low drag car that is definitely not going to be beneficial in dirty air. But that's where they're going with. Probably a smart idea, but this race evidently didn't pan out that way for them. Probably unpredictably, I would say, but they just got stuck there.
Yeah. Great question, as always, Miles. You have a habit.
Great questions this week.
They were.
Keep them coming.
All of them. They were all great. So keep the question coming in the mailbag section at the website, because they were all really good, in-depth questions. Really appreciate it. Also had some great interaction with a lot of you over at our Patreon page. I put up a video just on Sunday, just some.
Was it you walking the dog?
No, I need to do a dog walk video.
You should do a dog walking with Todd, and you just.
Wouldn't it be good?
Because you're just talking about stuff. You did that for a while. That was pretty good.
I did. I just talked about random stuff. It wasn't even Formula One stuff necessarily, but anyway, good conversation over on Patreon page. So, all right. Well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think about the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps. And now we have a 4-week break until the next race. What are we going to do? I don't know. What are we going to do?
Well, I'm going racing. I don't know about you.
You are going racing. I do know that. Yeah, maybe we should do another wine and cheese summer break podcast.
Yeah, we could do that. Sandwich it between my 2 Road America races, because I got Road America in IMSA this weekend coming, and then in 2 weeks back to Road America with the SRO team. So
maybe we could
Road America all weekend, all month long.
Yeah,
which is a good place to be. I think
it's a good track. Yeah. Maybe we could sandwich in a Get to Know Paul podcast.
I think they've known me enough. People seem to like the ones with all 3 of us on. I always enjoyed those myself. Actually.
Yeah, they do. They like with all 3 of us, and you get Grace spun up about Red Bull. You never know where we're going to land. So it'll be good fun. Yeah, such a hater. A hater. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, until next week when we come back and do it all over again with Grace. You can go to the website, theparcfermé.com. Support us there. On the right-hand side, it says support us. Click that. You can support us through Patreon. You can support us through PayPal, however you'd like to do that. And we would not do this podcast without our Patreon supporters. And we have, fun conversations over there. So anyway, that's much, much appreciated. If you like the podcast, go to your favorite podcast player and give us a good rating. And if you would rather see this Talking Heads, you can go to our YouTube channel. And I've got several of these podcasts now up on the YouTube channel if you'd like to watch Talking Heads. So you can do that at YouTube as well. And then I will be back next week to talk about all the Formula One news that there is to talk about next week. And until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camera, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.